Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I want to talk about F1 seasons where the champion, the driver's championship for that season, is generally regarded as not the best driver that year. And so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be comparing quality ratings and race ratings between the champion for that season and who got the highest quality rating, who got the highest race rating for that year. And so I've gotten all the data back up going till 1996. Interestingly enough, for both qualifying and the race, 18 years out of, I think, the 31 years, or 30 years, I should say, in that data set, the champion did not have the highest for one of those two. So again, it shows that sometimes, more often than not, the champion isn't always your best driver. And so today we're going to be looking at the top 10 for both, kind of the biggest differential between quality rating, race rating, and yeah, the top 10 for both categories. And I don't want this to be seen as kind of a slight on Norris, of course, or anything like that. I do think he drove, a good season. Again, did everything he needed to win the championship. But I do think, most pretty reasonable, watchers of this past season, most fans would still accept that, yeah, Verstappen probably was the best driver over the course of the season. That's something that, and it's like a difference between those two things that we haven't really seen for quite a long time. So again, it has been something that people have been talking about quite a bit running in the lead up to this season. Of course, was talked about as well a bit after the season finished, and Norris was crowned champion. So first, we're going to look at the quality rating differences. So difference in quality rating. So the first one, number 10, we're just going to look at the top 10. Number 10 is 2016. Rosberg, of course, your champion. The difference in quality rating, this will be kind of on an ascending scale, so the differences will be getting bigger. The best driver in qualifying that year was his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Not a big surprise. Hamilton did actually out-qualify Rosberg over the course of that season. Difference in quality rating was 0.101. And of course, Rosberg did get a little lucky to win that title. But that being said, he made the most of what he had to. Number 9, this one is a bit of an odd one. 2008 Hamilton and Vettel 0.108. Now for Hamilton, he didn't actually have that bad of a season purely from a qualifying perspective. But I guess the model really liked what Vettel did, and so it determined that Vettel was the best qualifier that year, even though it was his first full season in F1. So again, a little bit of an unusual there, that one. Probably also slightly skewed by the results of Monza, where of course Vettel got pole in the wet conditions, but that one came out as number 9. Now, number 8, 1996 Hill and Schumacher. This is one that gets talked about a lot. Hill, of course, in the very dominant Williams car, fastest car in qualifying by a massive margin. Of course, also had a rookie teammate that year, whereas for Schumacher, he was in the Ferrari, which was considered to be, second or third best. Some would argue third best, with the Benetton being marginally quicker in 1996. Difference there in quality rating is 0.153. Now moving on to number 7, it's actually one that's tied for 6, two years tied for 6. 2007, Raikkonen, of course, your champion in Ferrari. Alonso in the McLaren had the best quality rating that year, with the difference between the two drivers of 0.164. Now, the other year that was tied with that was actually 1997. That was Villeneuve and Schumacher again. Rating difference was the exact same there. And again, for Villeneuve, Schumacher, no one would really disagree with that. That generally, while the 97 Ferrari was definitely a step up on the 96 Ferrari, and the 97 Williams probably not quite as dominant as the 96 one. I don't think anyone would really disagree that Schumacher was the better of the two qualifiers. And some of these will again show up on the other list as well. Then for Raikkonen and Alonso, I think it was a bit of an odd season. Raikkonen definitely was not particularly dominant in qualifying. Him and Massa were very close. Alonso, though, he and Hamilton were very close. But I think with hindsight, I think most people would agree that Hamilton and Alonso were performing at probably a higher level than either Raikkonen or Massa were that season. So again, I don't think anyone would really disagree with that one too much. Now, number 5 is this is where 2025 comes in. Norris and Verstappen quality rating difference of 0.183. So again, 5th highest out of 30 years and 5th out of 18. So again, it is one of the bigger gaps in terms of difference in quality rating between the champion and best driver. But again, there's still 4 years where I deem that the difference was actually bigger. Norris didn't have a terrible season qualifying. He was generally pretty good. Even when he got out-qualified by Piastri, which happened 10 times, I believe, over the course of the season. Generally, he was still really, really close, and it wasn't like he was getting out-qualified by like 2-3 tenths of a second regularly. That did happen early on in the season when Norris was struggling in qualifying, but for basically the second 2/3 of the season, it was definitely not a problem for Norris. Generally was pretty good, but it's just Verstappen was that much better, very, very strong. Some excellent pole laps. Some seem to be in like the all-time great pole laps, such as Suzuka was, I think, the really standout one, but I think some of his other ones, such as Silverstone, were also very impressive. Okay, number 4, Alonso and Raikkonen again, but this time the other way around. 2005, Alonso champion, but Raikkonen in an era where he was driving the McLaren very, very fast. And again, difference between the two of them, 0.202. Now, the one caveat I will say is that from 2003 and 2009, the qualifying was done during a refueling era, and so the qualifying data is a little bit sketchier than it is since 2010, I would say. And so while, on the paper, Alonso may not have qualified as well, it may have been that he had it compared to his teammate and compared to other drivers, he may have differentially had a much, much better starting fuel load. And that could have also skewed things slightly. So that's just one caveat that I want to say for some of those seasons, which again would also cover 2007. Now, number 3, this was a bit of an interesting one, 2012. Vettel, of course, champion that year, but Hamilton actually was deemed to be the best qualifier. The rating difference between the two of them, 0.203. Now, the 2012 McLaren was a very fast car in one-lap pace. It was honestly not bad in race pace either, but the real problem with that McLaren was that it was made of glass and broke down way too often. And that really prevented Hamilton from challenging for that 2012 title. But still, yeah, the McLaren in 2012, very good in one-lap pace. Vettel and Red Bull a little bit sketchier. Things a little bit more inconsistent, especially in the first half of the season. And so Hamilton had the highest rating for that year. Now, getting into the top 2, number 2 is 2019. A little bit of an interesting one, but I think in retrospect, looking at how things went in 2021, I think maybe this is actually not so unusual. So 2019, Hamilton, Verstappen. Hamilton, of course, your champion. Verstappen, kind of in not necessarily a league of his own. It was basically a league of him and the 2 Ferraris, and his teammate was kind of nowhere. And this was, of course, the first year in the Verstappen destroys his teammate era, an era that has still not finished. And for Hamilton, this was definitely a tougher year, I think, in qualifying. Of all 5 of his seasons up against Bottas, this is the one where Bottas was the closest to him in one-lap pace. Did get Nick quite a few poles off of him, and so you could definitely see that from Hamilton's side, there was definitely a step back compared to previous seasons. And just in terms of qualifying pace, like 2018, Singapore pole lap was regarded as one of Hamilton's best ever. And basically from 2019 onwards, you didn't really have so many of those, magic qualifying laps. So again, a bit interesting that this is deemed to be the second biggest difference in qualifying performance between champion and best qualifier. Now, number 1, I don't think anyone would be too surprised that this one is going to be your answer, and this is 2009 Jenson Button up against Fernando Alonso with a quality rating difference of 0.4134 this season. Now, for Button, he was very, very close in qualifying between himself and Barrichello for basically the entire time as teammates together. Goes to McLaren and gets smoked by Hamilton in qualifying, I should specify, during their time as teammates. So again, I don't think anyone would really be, would argue the fact that, Button was probably not an elite qualifier. And so again, him being the year he was champion 2009, him not being the best qualifier, not really a big surprise. Being the biggest difference between quality rating and race and between himself and Alonso, who is deemed to have the best quality rating, maybe a little bit of surprise that's the biggest one, but nonetheless, that's kind of how the math ends out working. So that's your top 10 for difference. Norris and Verstappen this past season are on the list, and they come out at number 5. Now, taking a look at difference in race rating, this one is a little bit I would say race rating there's a little bit more of an element of chaos and unpredictability in this, and we'll see that when we get to number 1, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But it's still, I think, a pretty good indicator of how things work. So number 1 is 2016 again, oddly enough, and so Rosberg's champion, but Vettel was actually the driver with the best race rating in 2016. And so for this time, the differences will be descending just because the calculations, kind of the scale works the other way around. So difference of negative 0.518. So Rosberg a rating of basically 0.5 less than Vettel. Again, that's not too big of a difference, but still was the 10th biggest of the 18 years where the best driver or the best race rating was not the driver who was world champion. Now, number 9 was Villeneuve and Schumacher, negative 0.7. For Schumacher, for Villeneuve, I'll start with, it was definitely a sketchy year. There were crashes, moments that definitely did not help his rating and would have made his rating a lot worse. But for Schumacher as well, Jerez, for example, 97, just crashing out there, that's a big chunk of points lost there. So I think for Schumacher's race rating, he definitely had better seasons in this time period. And without perhaps if he had not made such an aggressive move and knocked himself out of Jerez 97, his race rating would have been higher, and this actually would have ended up higher on this list, and he also would not have gone disqualified from the season if he had not done that. But of course, still would have lost the championship nonetheless. Number 8, don't think there's going to be any argument with this one. 2012 Vettel and Alonso. So Vettel, of course, your champion. We already talked about how Hamilton had the best quality rating that year, but Alonso actually had the best race rating. Difference of negative 0.723. Alonso had a great year that year, basically really maximizing that Ferrari. A lot of bad luck. There was bad luck at times, such as Spa, where he basically got Grosjean'd. But he also did have, one big key mistake, which was the start crash at Suzuka, where he kind of went into Raikkonen and then knocked himself out of the race in a race I believe Vettel won, and that definitely turned the tables in the championship that year. Number 7 is actually a driver who's tied for 6. So again, just like quality rating, we have two pairings tied for 6. And number 6 is 1999, Mika Häkkinen and Heinz Harald Frentzen. Häkkinen, of course, your champion, and Frentzen came close, to putting up a championship fight towards the end of the season, but unfortunately was not really able to get it over the line. Difference between the two, negative 0.979. Häkkinen had definitely had a scruffy year. He was helped by Schumacher breaking his leg at Silverstone, but he had a couple of really sketchy races, including that crash at Monza, pretty famous, him crying at the side of the track after he crashed out there. Frentzen was seen as really performing to the maximum in a good but not great Jordan. Getting quite a few race wins throughout the season, and it really looked like he might have been able to win that title, but unfortunately things not going his way towards the end. But still, he was regarded as having the highest race rating in 1999. Now, the other season that's tied for 6 is 2017, Hamilton and Ricciardo. Difference of negative 0.979. Now, Ricciardo had a very, very strong season, wins in Baku, got a whole bunch of other podiums, beats Verstappen as well, last teammate to beat Verstappen in Drivers' Championship over a season. So again, Ricciardo can be proud about that. Hamilton had a good year, but it was definitely not as strong as 2018. He had a bit of a slow start. Bottas was faster at him at a number of tracks, and it did feel like he was definitely held by Ferrari imploding in the Asian leg of the season. But so that definitely contributed to the rating difference being what it was. Number 5, this is where Hill and Schumacher show up. So again, we already talked about the qualifying difference, but in race difference, Hill definitely had a number of races that were pretty bad. I've recently watched the season for the first time, or what you can watch of it at least, on F1 TV, and so you have races like Spain crashes out, Silverstone crashes out, Monza runs into a tire wall, crashes out there as well. Where Schumacher was generally excellent that season, did have poor reliability at points and a much inferior Ferrari, but Hill definitely made the championship much harder for himself than it really needed to be. Now, moving on to the top 4, number 4, this is where Norris and Verstappen show up. Rating difference between the two of them, actually that should be a negative 1.38, so a bit of a mistake on my part. Keep things consistent. So negative 1.38. which gets, again, a little bit bigger than 1996, but still not in the top 3. Now, for Norris, again, I've already talked about this season, at quite a bit lengthened because it's, the most recent season, of course. I think, most people don't really need a refresher on what exactly happened here. Norris and Piastri generally very, very close all season long in terms of points. But I think for both of them, there were points where it felt like they were definitely not getting the most out of the McLaren, and, weekends where they lost to the other one were also, just indications that, maybe they were struggling. Of course, for Norris, biggest mistake of the season was definitely in Canada. Those 10 points, 10 points roughly lost there, where he basically crashed into the back of his teammate. For Verstappen, generally excellent season, but was not perfect. However, the mistake in Spain with Russell, and then spinning in behind the safety car in Silverstone were probably his 2 only blemishes for the season, but nonetheless was excellent and was generally regarded as getting the most out of the Red Bull most of the season. And kind of incredible that despite the fact that in terms of pole gap, the Red Bull, I think on average, was about 2/10 off the McLaren for the season as a whole. But Verstappen ends up getting more pole positions than either McLaren driver gets individually. So a bit incredible how that works out. But nonetheless, still a very, very good season by Verstappen. It will generally, I think, be remembered in kind of the same tier as Hill, Schumacher 96, as well as, Alonso 2012, as, seasons where, great seasons that don't end up in a championship, I should say. But moving on into the top 3, number 3 is 2010 Vettel and Alonso, negative 1.396. Alonso had a great season that year. Again, took the title fight all the way to Abu Dhabi. And was actually in a very good position to win the title, except, his Ferrari strategy crew definitely had a bit of an oopsie there. Vettel had a scrappy season. I'd say definitely scrappier than 2012. He had big mistakes in Turkey, crashing into his teammate. He crashed into Button in Spa as well. So you had 2 big mistakes there. He did also have very poor reliability, which is not his fault. And again, that's something that the rating would have taken into account. But Alonso definitely was the better of the 2 drivers in that season. Just Red Bull had a very, very fast car, especially in quality trim, and that really helped them in the races. Of course, when you have a fast car in qualifying, you're starting more often than not from the front of the grid. And actually, one last thing I should say is that Vettel, in this 30 years of data that I have, he is the only driver to win a championship with a negative quality or negative race rating. So a negative race rating meant that it was actually below average, which is kind of incredible, but still kind of shows just how strong that Red Bull was in 2010. Now, number 2 is 2008 Hamilton and Vettel, rating difference of negative 1.5. Vettel finally shows up on the right side of a difference, rating difference for once. Now for Hamilton, I think everyone kind of knows that 2008 between Raikkonen, Massa, and Hamilton, this was a very scrappy season for all 3 of them. A lot of mistakes for all of them. Hamilton crashed into Alonso in Bahrain for one. He also had a number of other races that were pretty poor. I think, I'm trying to remember, was it Fuji? I think Fuji as well. He had a pretty brutal race there as well. And there was a couple others spread in there. But for Vettel, of course, he generally had a really good season. Did start quite quiet, but basically by the second half of the season, he was doing a really good job. And of course, everyone remembers Monza as well, where he gets that great win in front of the Italian crowd, driving the Toro Rosso. Now, what I want to say, and this is relevant to the driver pairing at number 1, is that, of course, the Toro Rosso was basically a midfield car, maybe upper midfield by the end of the season with Vettel driving it. And because of how the nature of how points work, you get a lot of points for wins, and you don't get so many points if you finish, 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th, right? Of course, back then there were no points for 9th and below. And what happens is that if you have one race where you get a really abnormal result, like a really abnormally good result, and you're a midfield to a lower midfield car, it can basically have an outsized impact on your race rating for that whole season. Even if the rest of the season was, good to mediocre, having one really, really good result can basically make your rating for the entire season look amazing. And so for Vettel, this probably had a big of an impact. So even if you can say maybe Vettel was not the best driver in that season, perhaps it was Alonso, Vettel had the best rating. in part, I think, because of 2008. And this is something to remember as well when we get to the pairing at number 1, which was a bit of a unusual one. So number 1 it is actually Michael Schumacher 2003 and Giancarlo Fisichella. Now, based on what I just said, you could probably work out how this happens. And again, I'm just going based off the numbers. I'm not doing, this isn't like my opinion or of what the biggest differences are. But yeah, so the difference between the two of them, negative 1.792, so basically bigger than everyone else. Now for Schumacher, he of course won the championship this year in a Ferrari that was pretty good. Maybe not as dominant as 2003 and not as dominant as the next year, 2004. But he did have a number of pretty scrappy races in there. At least I think one DNF and a couple races where he'd started at the front and kind of fell backwards as well. And, you know, his teammate Barrichello didn't have a terrible season either. Did get a couple wins, I believe. Definitely got some pole positions as well. And so there were races where it did feel like Schumacher did underperform a little bit. And so his race rating overall is actually not very good. It's one of the weakest of all of his championship winning seasons. In fact, the weakest, without a doubt. So he had a good season, but not a great one, I would say, just based on that. Fisichella, of course, won the 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix. Spoiler alert. I know it's been 20-something years, so again, maybe not a big spoiler. But he won the 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix in a Jordan that was very, very poor, very unreliable. He didn't even finish that many races in that season, to be honest. And so for Fisichella, it was a season where, you know, his results, his points tally in particular, was really dominated by that one race in Brazil, which again was a great victory in a, you know, not great Jordan car. And so again, just a bit like Vettel, except I would say even more so, because that was, I think, even bigger proportion of his overall points. Fisichella did have the highest race rating for that 2003 season, and it was actually the best season of his career from a just race rating perspective. And that, as a result, basically gave him the biggest rating, and then thus the biggest difference in race rating between the champion and the driver with the highest rating. So that's all for this video. Just I thought an interesting thing to talk about. So again, Norris, Verstappen, I guess the conclusion is, do show up as on both of these lists in terms of difference between race rating and quality rating. But you know, it's not the end of the world. Norris still wins his championship. He can say that for the rest of his life, that he's world champion. And again, no one can take that away from him. He did, you know, a good job. I wouldn't say a great job. I think, you know, Verstappen's quote towards the end of the season, I can't remember if it was in Qatar or Abu Dhabi, where he said that if he had been driving McLaren, he would have won the title, like, with multiple rounds to spare. Again, it sounds harsh. I know some of the British media probably didn't like to hear that, but I do think it's probably true. And so again, I thought this was an interesting thing to look at, especially since it's something we haven't really seen recently. Like, if you look at all of these seasons, the most recent season we have for the race rating is 2017, so that's almost 8 years ago. If we look at quality rating, I think it was 2019, so that's, you know, let's see, was that 6 years ago? So again, in terms of recent seasons, generally the best driver has won the championship, whether that's, you know, Hamilton 2018, Verstappen the last couple years before this. So this is kind of something that's a bit unusual in terms of recent F1 history, just because of how, you know, how the driver and team combinations have you know, stacked up. But it was an interesting conversation to have, interesting for me to look at as well. And so that's all kind of for the end of this video, kind of discussing differences in race rating and quality rating between champion and the best driver for each season. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.